Have you ever looked at a contract for sale and wondered what the words joint tenants and tenants in common mean? Well, I'm going to go through what the differences are. Referencing the ATO website, co-ownership and right of survivorship is what we need to go through first. So how ownership of a property is transferred if an owner dies and they were tenants in common or joint tenants. So what is right of survivorship? When property ownership is shared and an owner dies, how their share of the property is transferred is based on the co-ownership arrangement. So this is called the right of survivorship. And there are two types, tenants in common and joint tenants. Tenants in common are two or more people who are separately own a percentage of a property. The percentages may be unequal. So tenants in common can bequeath their share of the property to anyone. When a tenant in common dies, their share in the property becomes an asset of the deceased estate. There is no right of survivorship. Their interest in the property can be transferred to a beneficiary of the estate, or it can be sold or otherwise disposed of by the legal personal representatives of the estate. A tenant in common has the right to sell, mortgage or lease their share of the property. They can do this without the agreement of the other tenants. So an example of a surviving tenant in common. Anita and Nor bought a property as tenants in common. Anita took an 80% share and Nor took a 20% share of the property. Some years later, Anita died. Anita's 80% share of the property became an asset of her deceased estate. In her will, Anita identified her son Isaac as a beneficiary of her estate. Therefore, her 80% share in the property is transferred to Isaac. Joint tenants. Joint tenants have an equal share in the ownership of an asset. If a joint tenant dies, the other tenant or tenants has a right of survivorship. The deceased tenant's interest is not an asset of their estate. However, for capital gains tax purposes, the deceased's interest is taken to pass in equal shares to the surviving joint tenants, as if the interest is an asset of the deceased estate, and the surviving joint tenants are beneficiaries. This means if the property was the deceased man's main residence, the surviving joint tenants may be entitled to the main residence exemption for the acquired interest. An example of surviving joint tenants. So Laura and Damien bought a 2-bedroom apartment as joint tenants. Some years later, Damien died. Damien's 50% interest in the property was passed to Laura as the surviving joint tenant. Do you have any experience when it comes to buying property as joint tenants or tenants in common? We'd love to hear from you. Feel free to leave a comment below, or if you've got any questions that you'd like us to clear up, leave a comment and we'll help you. Thank you.